Urgent UX, and this is the unfair matches of the Roman Colosseum. But channel good enough. Yes, Salmonella inspired channel, which is like growing really fast. In just like a month or two, I think it was in just a month or so, like it's like 100,000 plus subscriber, and like yeah, and this like really gruesome channel. You basically saw sometimes Salmonella, like amplifies with the animation, it goes brutal. He just like, what if I do with all the videos all the time? I watched those, leopard attack videos on India, which really surprised me. I didn't know that there are that much cases in India. Not to mention a legendary hunter from Britain basically did things, and even there is a zoo named after him in India. Apparently, I don't know a lot of things about my own country. That's what I learned. And yeah, the Vietnam War thing, traps. Oh my God. Right, I'm pretty sure I've watched a few videos from this channel. So this is about unfair matches of Roman Colosseum. I know a few, right, because I've watched certain videos about Roman Empire and things like that, like how they sometimes like fight with animals, this and that. Yeah, so it's gonna be really good. Let's watch this one. Remember, we'll flag more, subscribe, so that way I know which type of videos to react to more. I like videos like this, obviously, as you've been seeing a lot of you. Salmonella, this, Blue Jay, kind of similar channels. So yeah, let's watch this one.
Let's start with the unfair and slowly work our way towards the most brutal matchups on the list. Number 10. Blind Fighters. Andebadia were criminals who would be forced to fight completely blind. They would be given a straight sword and a helmet for protection. Except the helmet was practically a curse, since it was completely sealed off, preventing the fighter from seeing or hearing anything. The fight would begin as soon as the fighters were placed within close range of one another, with the most popular strategy being the swing and pray method, which in all honesty, was the only strategy available. Now, the good news is that judges weren't really needed for these fights, since the winners were very easy to identify, as they were the only contestants still breathing. Now, the crazy part is that this spectacle was seen as comedic relief more than anything, and if you don't think two blind men fighting each other to the death is hilarious, well, you have a lot to learn about comedy. Now, this might not sound...
Oh my God, this gives me a psychological view into the people back then and how they perceived life in general. They didn't care about human life, right? And that just makes me really like panic, chills down my spine. Because if they believe something based on whatever, whether it's like religion-based things like, what is it, Jupiter, whatever the gods that is, they might stop thinking about someone as human if it just like aligns right? Whether it's kids or anything, right? That's just fucked up. Like, I don't know, like thieves, this and that, without even realizing common sense or like like humane thing. That probably doesn't vibe with them. If they can do shit like this and, oh, this is funny, look at those two blind blinded people just fighting each other to death, oh, isn't that funny? That just panics me. I don't know why. It's just, imagine a scenario where there's like a kid or something, right? For whatever reason, just by being an idiot or something, steals something. They just like, oh, stealing, you might not as well be human, and just like kills the kid or something. And everybody cheers. Shit like that happens in the past, right? Roman times, medieval times. That's just fucked up.
That unfair at first, since both men are equally blind and equipped with the same weapon. But think again, since the winner of the match would typically be rewarded with another match. Then another one, and another one, and another one. You get the point. As you can imagine, a winning streak never really lasted for very long. Number 9. Naval Battles. There was nothing more epic than the naval battles of the Colosseum. Also, one of the most unfair, bloody, and expensive. The event would begin by filling the Colosseum with water in around a dozen ships. It's estimated that thousands of prisoners would participate in these events. But let's talk about what made these battles unfair. Now, depending on the starting position of your ship, it could determine your likelihood of survival. Well, at least for a bit longer, as the odds of survival were almost non-existent to begin with. Ships that started in between two other ships would make for an easy target, easily creating a 1v2 scenario. Prisoners would invade other ships, killing everyone that stood in their way, while others would simply use the more popular strategy we see today, which is of course, running away from all fights and sneaking their way to the final round, where they can hope to steal the win with a single kill. The bloody fight would come to an end when there was only one ship or team remaining. As terrible as these battles were, at least they were easy to clean up. The Romans would try their best to remove all the large debris from the water, before the stadium would be flushed like a giant toilet bowl, sending all the remains downstream for another town to deal with. Number 8. Gladiator fights. Gladiator fights were the single most popular matches of the Colosseum, with the good match.
Oh god, that ship thing is. First of all, they figure out, fuck it, what if we make man-made lake inside a stadium? This is a flex, at least in Roman times, 2000 plus years ago. What if we like flood the Colosseum with water and have like makeshift ship battles, right? This is like next level when you think about it, right? Should we go to a lake? Should we go to something? No, let's build a proper lake size, like lake style thing inside a stadium. In today's world, that would be like, yeah, makes sense. Back then, I mean, come on, that's a flex.
Matchups typically being saved for the main event. Now, how can two gladiators fighting each other be unfair, you might ask? Well, for starters, the emperors weren't really interested in fairness, as their primary concern was entertainment. And with over 20 different classes of gladiators to choose from,
Are you not entertained? Is this what that is? Yeah. Gladiatrix. Okay.
styles would be mixed and matched based on entertainment alone. Here are some of the most unfair and popular matchups. Retiarius versus Secutor. Retiarius were equipped with a net, a trident, a dagger, and minimal armor, while the Secutor was equipped with a sword, a large shield, a helmet, and heavy armor. Go ahead, pick one. If you chose the Secutor, well, GG's, you're dead, as the Retiarius just had to keep his distance and poke at the
I knew that. Long range weapon, right? Whenever you have trident, spear, whatever it's called, right? What was that? Phalanx. Yeah, you probably have much heavier advantage.
Secutor. Or better yet, trap him by throwing his net on him, giving him enough time to emote before poking him to death. Alright, let's try another one. Murmillo versus Thorax. Murmillo were armed with a large rectangular shield, a short sword, a helmet, and a metal or leather sleeve for protection, while the Thorax was equipped with a light shield, a curved sword, a helmet, and a metal or leather sleeve for protection. Go ahead, pick one. If you chose the Murmillo, rip, you're dead, as the Thorax just had to tire out the Murmillo since he was carrying the heavier shield. As you can see, stylistic matchups were a big deal and could easily influence the outcome of a fight. And I know this might come as a shock to some, but not all gladiator fights were to the death. A lot of fights would be called off when a fighter took heavy damage.
I mean, makes sense. You run out of people very fast if you do that shit. This is kind of like fight element. Even in MMA, that's the case, right? Why is John Jones so dominant? Because he's big, but not too big. So he can have an element of like endurance and shit, right? I mean, if he was like 260 or something, like, oh, he would be too fat to have any meaningful thing. But he's big, he has big reach, and he's smaller for his size.
Since good gladiators were very expensive to replace. Number 7. Animal battles. Humans were not the only ones to have unfair matchups inside of the Colosseum, since animals were also treated like criminals. They would be enslaved, pinned against each other, and humiliated, and were such a popular spectacle that at times, thousands of animals would be slaughtered in a given day, which was completely unsustainable, driving many animals to extinction. Here are some of the most popular and unfair matchups that were commonly seen in the Colosseum. Elephant versus Rhino. One of the most famous Colosseum battles was when an enraged rhino was pinned against an elephant, with the elephant eventually winning when he decided to cheat by grabbing a spear with its trunk and gouging the rhino's eyes out.
I was about to say that elephant better not lose, because the elephant never loses in situations. Yes, rhino is like heavy thing, not heavier than elephant, but heavy and with the horn and things. But it's a panicky thing with not much intelligence, but elephant is insanely intelligent and just overall bigger and can do many things. So it better win. Yeah, it did.
Lion versus tiger. This matchup is basically a robbery.
Tiger better win. I know tiger is stronger, has more muscle mass, and its claw swipe is nearly twice as stronger, right? I'm pretty sure lion has bigger bite than tiger or something. But yeah, lion usually are dominant because they're in pack, while tigers are not. But tiger is just like proper monster.
As I'm sure the locals would have bet large amounts of money against the guys from out of town, since they knew that the lion always wins, with there only being one recorded incident of a tiger getting the best of a lion. Elephant versus bull. As you can imagine, when an animal has over 10—
What tiger?
10,000 pounds on its.
Oh, I don't know why Mike stopped there. Yeah, so it surprised me. I don't know why. Tiger is stronger and more muscular than a lion by a long range. It's not like slightly, it's a lot. I guess because of lion's whole psychology, the hair and all that plays, right? The mane and thing. Mane, whatever, that the face, hair thing, it just makes lion look bigger. Psychology is right. But yeah, tiger is much more athletic, right? If you were to think of all the big cats, what is the really athletic powerhouse? It would be tiger, right? How insanely they jump, how they single-handedly power. Look at all the tiger or champa or whatever that is, right? In India, the level of power that gives is insane. But yeah, lion being lion, king of the jungle, maybe there you go. I think it's psychology. If tiger and lion both were much smarter and tiger realizes what it is, I'm pretty sure he can take out lion easily. But it's psychology, I think.
Its opponent, it's not really going to be much of a fight, is it? But just to make matters worse, sometimes the elephant and the bull would be chained together, forcing the action. And no matter how the fight begins, it would always end with the bull being turned to soup. Really quickly, here are some of the other animal fights that were very popular. Rhino versus bear, rhino versus buffalo, rhino versus elephant, crocodile versus hippo, tiger versus bear, bear versus bull, bear versus wolves, goro versus scorpion, lion versus bull, lion versus bear, lion versus panther, lion versus chimp.
Wait. One of them were fake. It was lion versus panther. That was the Goro thing. Yeah, that makes sense. The Mortal Kombat. Yeah, that was real. I think lion versus panther. That was fake.
Lion versus hyenas. Lion versus basically any animal the Romans can get a hold of. Number 6. 1 versus 2. This matchup can be unfair for either side depending on the circumstances.
I mean, you played Elder Scrolls Oblivion. You've been into arenas, which I'm pretty sure I played other games with arenas. Witcher? No, not Witcher. Assassin's Creed Origins, yeah, there was also arena there with multiple fighters.
Let me explain. There are 2 scenarios in which this matchup can take shape. 1. A high-level gladiator will take on 2 prisoners simultaneously, and as the prisoners try their best to figure out how to properly hold a sword, they will realize that it's very difficult to do so, since their hands are no longer attached. Now, the second scenario is a bit more fair. 3 well-trained gladiators were placed inside of the Colosseum. One gladiator would be given heavy armor and a good weapon, while his 2 opponents would receive minimal armor and worse weapons. The duo would need to work together to defeat the better equipped man. But being partnered up is not as easy as you might think, and does come with its own set of challenges, like knowing whether you should go for the res or attempt to clutch up when your partner inevitably goes down. The last and final way that a gladiator can be outnumbered is during large-scale battles. This one is of course purely based on luck alone, and doesn't always mean that you will see a 1v2 matchup, as it just might be a 1v6 depending on how bad your team is. Number 5. Woman versus dwarf. Emperor Domitian introduced the legendary matchup woman versus dwarf, and I have to admit this is the only battle on the list where a clear winner was not well documented. But even with the little information we do have, I have a gut feeling that it just wasn't a fair matchup. I'm just not certain for whom. You see, on one hand, you have a fully grown woman who obviously has the reach advantage, while on the other hand, you have a male dwarf who is much stronger and obviously uses magic. How much stronger? Well, I'm not sure. I did, however, stumble upon this forum.
The shorter limbs gives you ability to grow larger muscles, right? But how much, I mean, again, it comes down to condition, like how well fed he is, how strong he is, like muscular and all that way. Like, how did people become muscular back in the day? Who the fuck knows? I don't know.
Where a guy asked the same question back in 2011. Now, sadly, people just replied back with even more interesting questions that we will never get the answers to. And of course, naturally, the entire forum devolved into guys just bragging about how many dwarves they can take on at once. One of the most bizarre things about this matchup was that Emperor Domitian liked to schedule this fight at night, since he preferred this battle when it was illuminated by torchlights. In 2010, a female gladiator's remains were found in England. After they were examined, it was concluded that the woman's legs and arm bones were unusually heavy, suggesting that she had strong muscles. You know, I was originally leaning towards the dwarf, but now I really don't see how they could possibly win. Number 4. Wild.
Look, a dwarf would have like smaller body, so it's not easier to hit. depend if the dwarf is like combat ready, he might develop techniques that might benefit him in that way. And obviously, like I said, stronger muscle he can develop, right? Because the shorter limbs can really take the load. There's a reason why tall guys are usually not overly like 6'5", 7 foot, usually not overly muscular, because the limbs and like joints take a lot of like damage that way. But yeah.
Wild animal hunts. Perhaps one of the most unique spectacles of the Colosseum was the wild animal hunts. Here, the entire Colosseum arena was made to resemble the animal's natural environment. A few men were then brought out to the arena equipped with small shields and weapons. Then for the next few minutes or hours, the arena would be slowly filled with terrifying predators. But if they really wanted to get the crowd on their feet, all the animals would be released at once. Sometimes the men who were fighting the lions, bears, and panthers would have been well-trained fighters, while other times they would have been condemned criminals who were just given the death sentence and stood zero to no chance of winning. Here are some of the animals you could have expected to make an appearance: lions, tigers, bears, elephants, rhinos, panthers, leopards, hyenas, wolves, boars, bulls, deers, ostriches, crocodiles, giraffes, camels, and shiprats. Of course, shiprats were not invited, but they showed up anyways. Number 3, man versus...
Yeah, Roman Empire was insane, right? This was 2000 years ago. So there's been many instances where people can't even see or know if exotic animals even exist. But look at how much list there is of how many animals fought in the Colosseum. Romans like, find me a tiger, okay, find me any combination you can think of, find them. They just somehow always found them. That's a proper empire. When you can find anything you want like that, that's an empire, right? And this was 2000 years ago.
Versus beast. Man versus beast matches were one-on-one battles and were the second most popular spectacle, only behind gladiator fights. Now, there were basically two ways that this matchup would be arranged, with both of them tailored for maximum entertainment for the crowd. The first one was when a professional slave or volunteer fighter known as a bestiarius would face off with a terrifying beast. The animal could be anything from a lion, leopard, tiger, bear, or any other large and powerful creature. These battles would typically end with the animal being defeated, even if the bestiarius took heavy damage. On the other hand, the second matchup was much more bloody and typically ended with the man being torn to pieces. Here, a criminal or prisoner of war would be forced to face off with the animal.
I'm not gonna lie, how someone can take down a lion or tiger, a human, even with a sword, is like, If you have like something like phalanx or like trident, it makes sense. But yeah, those tigers and lions can be insanely explosive. If they just lunges at really high speed with their muscle and size, how the fuck? You can try to stab them with sword, I guess, as soon as they lunge at you. I don't know though.
Animal. With little to no training, it was only a matter of time before the man would become an anatomy lesson. And it definitely didn't help that the animals were starved for long periods of time before they were brought out, making them a lot more angry and aggressive. There was even a single lion that took out over 200 men before it was finally defeated, which is obviously a padded record, since it clearly fought nothing but tomato cans. Oh, I should also mention there is another event that was very popular and is somewhat related, where a criminal was tied to a stake and then a wild animal would be released to eat him alive. You know, you would think that this would be one of those situations where if you've seen it once, then you've seen them all type of deal. But apparently some emperors love to show this one quite often. Number 2, prisoner versus professional gladiator. Easily one of the most unfair matchups of the Colosseum was when prisoners would face off against a professional and seasoned gladiator. The professional gladiator could have been a slave himself with many fights under his belt, or a volunteer gladiator that was part of one of the many gladiatorial schools. Either way, the criminal with zero to no experience was basically sentenced to death. You see, what could be worse than being invaded, enslaved, and kept inside of a cell for days, just to be given a weapon you have never used, then pushed to the center of the Colosseum floor, only for Spartacus to make his walkout shortly after you. Number 1. Rigged fights. What could be more unfair than rigged matches? Emperor Commodus was definitely the worst offender when it came...
Yeah, the dickhead. I know this, right? But he's the same one from the Gladiator, right? The leaves one? Yeah, he's the same one. The movie Gladiator.
To rigged matches. The emperor ruled Rome from 180 to 192 AD and was even portrayed by Joaquin Phoenix in the 2000 film Gladiator. Commodus was obsessed with...
I'm pretty sure this was the last emperor, right? After this Roman Empire fell? Or was it second last or something?
Becoming a famous and well-respected gladiator. So much so that he would even compete himself. Well, if you could even call it that. An emperor fighting as a gladiator was unheard of. Now, of course, Commodus had the best training in all of Rome and was actually very talented with the sword, but that wouldn't stop him from rigging fights by secretly injuring men just moments before they were brought out to face him. His opponents were injured in a way that could be concealed under their armor, but be devastating enough to hinder their performance or make a limb unusable. Another strategy that the emperor would use was simply fighting men with zero to no experience, making for another easy W. Emperor Commodus would have the longest undefeated record as a gladiator, and it's suspected that he competed hundreds of times. He would also charge the Roman treasury around 25,000 pieces of silver every time he competed. There are many things you could call Emperor Commodus, but one thing you can't say is that he ever discriminated, since animals were also injured and thrown in to face him. Apparently, he killed hundreds of lions, ostriches, some giraffes, and on one occasion even killed 3 elephants that were just laying on the floor. Now, as horrible as this all sounds, this was all just a warm-up, and in November of 192 AD, he held the Polybian Games, a festival that lasted around 2 weeks. There, Commodus shot hundreds of animals with arrows and javelins every single day. But if it makes you feel any better, 1 month after the Polybian Games, Commodus would be strangled to death inside of his bathtub by a professional wrestler named Narcissus. Which, for a man, that has to be the most embarrassing way to be found dead. Completely naked inside of a cold tub. You can't even explain your way out of that one.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Commodus was just shit, right? However, there was the unfair matches of Roman Colosseum. I kind of knew some of them, but a lot of them kind of surprised me as well, with how they were like done, right? It's really hard to understand people's perspective and like how their psychology was 2,000 years ago. But whenever you think of it, you always are. That's how humanity is. You think of old things, you're probably gonna get horrified, because apparently newer and newer time is more safer time, whether you like it or not. Even if people with the news and like social media fear mongering is high in today's world, like, you know, in generally like countries like USA, major countries, Indian, crime is constantly going down, right? Those are not some padded stats. That is actually happening with higher surveillance and things. It's not like things are not getting noticed. It's getting noticed more, and yet crimes are going down. So yeah, the more back you see, things are going to be more fucked up. Alright, well, if you like my subscribe, and I'll see you next time.